Now that Liverpool's Champions League match has finished, going into game week 23, it looks even more clearer who the best third Liverpool pick is. And we're going to discuss that in today's video alongside the best Bournemouth attacker. Is Kluivert actually the best one to buy? As always, if you're looking for today's video, make sure to drop a like. Aim for 300 on this video. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you do smash that subscribe button. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So going into game week 23, most of the main transfers in are going to be Liverpool players, and that is totally understandable with their home fixture against Ipswich, who just shipped 6 goals against Man City. And then of course, as we know already, hopefully you know this already, a double game week in 24 for Liverpool, then Wolves at home in game week 25. So while some managers are waiting around to see who the best Liverpool pick is when we get to game week 24, because of that home game against Ipswich in 23, I personally feel like it is a brilliant entry point to do so this week. And I think with the Champions League game that we saw last night, it gives us a bit more clarity on maybe who we are happy to take the risk on. Now, here we have the lineup of last night's game. And as you can see, we have some familiar faces in the shape of Alisson, Van Dijk, Salah. Don't think anybody was going to be surprised at those starting. But the big omissions in this game is going to include Konate and Trent. Both of those were on the bench. McAllister in midfield. And of course, Cody Gakpo, who didn't come on at all. Trent came on for the last 5 minutes. Konate also got 0 minutes. Now, a lot of managers are going to read this in 2 ways. One, they're going to view this as maybe the best Liverpool team barring Trent, because of course Darwin scored 2 in game week 22. Are we now assuming that Darwin is the forward and Jota of course is now injured for the next few weeks? Personally, I think this was just a team played by Slot where he had to play some of the key players but also rotate those that have played considerable minutes. Trent being benched is no surprise. Nobody panic on that scenario there. But for me, the fact that Cody Gakpo didn't even come on this game suggests to me that it was just a complete rest for him. And it now makes him, for game week 23, almost a guaranteed starter. I would be astonished if he doesn't play in this game and then also doesn't feature in the Ipswich game. And because of those Liverpool fixtures, I think we all knew going into double game week 24 that actually Gakpo is the safer pick. But can you get him also in the Ipswich home game? So what I wanted to do here, just for all of the Liverpool assets, is put up a bit of a chart here. Now, this is homemade, so no judgments in the comments, but it is a bit of a risk on the bottom reward graph that you can see here. And I've also included the ones that I just think are absolutely essential for your team. So as you can see at the very top there, low risk, high reward is going to include both Mo Salah and Trent. I don't see any problems about their minutes. I was a little bit worried before about Trent. Don't see that anymore now. I think Conor Bradley plays in the next Champions League game and also the Plymouth game, and Trent will play all of the league games. Same applies to Mo Salah. I don't think we have to talk too much about those. It's going to be about the third Liverpool pick. And what I do love about the options available to us is they vary in what kind of FPL manager you are. So at the bottom here, we have got both Alisson and Virgil van Dijk. Now, Alisson is absolutely risk-free. He will play every single minute. But I would also argue that the reward of owning him probably is a bit minimal as well. I know he scored a 9-pointer in game week 22, but historically, Alisson is a guy who's going to get you 2 or 6 points. So I think he is a brilliant pick for your teams, but he isn't the most exciting. Also, the same could be said about Virgil van Dijk. No worry whatsoever about his minutes, but of course, his rewards aren't going to be that big as well. Now, he does have a bit of a history of scoring in double game weeks, but we haven't really seen that as much this season. And if I had to choose one of the two, I actually think I'll just go for Alisson as opposed to Virgil van Dijk and save yourself the 1 million. Now we come into a bit of a cluster here of players who are very, very lowly owned, but I'd probably say rightly so. Konate here, I would say, is, again, very, very low reward. And I would say he's a bit more riskier than that of Alisson and Virgil van Dijk. It's just because we know Konate has been playing with painkillers. Could we see him also get a minute's rest in one of those next league games? I think we could possibly do so. The only thing going in his favour was benched in the Champions League game. We might see him just feature in the Premier League game, and that is it. And at 5.1 million, that then makes him a very, very interesting pick. Then we got McAllister and Szoboszlai, both less than 5% owned. I would argue that McAllister's minutes are a bit more safer than that of Szoboszlai's. He did start last night in Liverpool's game. And I also would say that maybe McAllister has a slightly higher attacking potential, but we have seen at times Szoboszlai play as the false nine. The only problem is with Darwin Núñez, Diaz, I can't see Szoboszlai starting as the false nine every single game. So I do prefer McAllister over Szoboszlai, but again, I don't really feel compelled to go to either of those picks. Then we get into the ones that a lot of managers are talking about. So first we got Cody Gakpo. You can see him sat kind of in the middle of this chart here. For me, I feel like he is the safest of the minutes when we compare it to that of Diaz and Darwin Núñez. And I would also argue that his rewards aren't at the absolute top. We haven't seen huge returns from him this season, only a couple of double-digit returns. But if he is going to have decent minutes, I expect the rewards to be good nonetheless. Similar could be said about Luis Diaz. Now, if he is going to get solid minutes, I think his rewards will be better than that of Gakpo, just because Diaz is just one of those players that is an explosive returner at times. But I do think there is risk on those minutes. We've seen it over the last couple of months, and I think that could continue. So it's a reason why I do prefer Cody Gakpo over someone like a Diaz. The only thing we need to factor into the equation, of course, is that Gakpo is a forward, Diaz is a midfielder, and it might actually just benefit your team structure going for Diaz rather than Gakpo. And finally, we've got Darwin Núñez right at the top of the chart there, because I think that is exactly where he belongs. This guy is the ultimate risk, but I do feel like he could be the ultimate reward. Now, I've said this over the last 12 months, and Darwin Núñez has continued to disappoint. But if you want to go there, I don't hate it. You need to note, though, you are getting a guy who could easily be benched against Ipswich because he started the full 90 in the Champions League game. He then might get 20 against Bournemouth. He might get 70 against Everton and then 0 against Wolves. It could be that. I don't think the risk is worth taking on Darwin Núñez, especially when Gakpo is there and only slightly more expensive. So let me know in the comment section what you think about this chart here in terms of, do you agree, do you not agree? I think if you want to go safe, just get Alisson in. Really cheap, good option for your team. Otherwise, based on that Champions League game, I now think Cody Gakpo is the third Liverpool pick for our teams, but of course is only useful to you if you actually want to own a forward in your team structure. If not, probably would chase Luis Diaz. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So next up, I wanted to take a look at the most bought player going into game week 23, Kluivert of Bournemouth, 5.6 million midfielder. And I wanted to compare him to probably the most popular Bournemouth midfielder over the opening 22 game weeks in Semenyo to understand, is Kluivert considerably the better pick over Semenyo? Because I own Semenyo right now, and I do think he is still decent FPL value. So we're going to take a look at those two right now and also understand, do we actually even need a Bournemouth midfielder in our team? So we've got the underlying numbers here based on per 90 minutes. You can see Kluivert for both goals and expected goals leads the way. 0.66 goals, 0.57 expected goals. When you see Semenyo's numbers, that is absolutely how I would define his season. He's been really good in the underlying numbers, 0.46 expected goals, but his actual output has just not been consistent at all. The one thing I do want to note about expected goals is that they really are shifted in Kluivert's favour because of the penalties. Now, when we take penalties out of the equation, Semenyo's remains at 0.46 per 90 minutes because, of course, he hasn't taken a penalty. But Kluivert's dramatically drops to 0.27 per 90. Now, that is a big drop off. Of course, Kluivert has had lots of penalties this season, and it's worth noting he scored all of them. He is one of the best in the league for it. So that is one thing that I do want to note. It's one thing that's a benefit that Kluivert has penalties, but also I want to say that majority of Kluivert's returns have been dependent on penalties. Read into that what you will. I still think Kluivert being on penalties is fantastic. Now, when we look at the actual shots per 90, Semenyo is one of the highest of the season in all categories, but he doesn't get any on target. 4.16 shots per 90, but only 1.17 on target. So that's all well and good, taking loads of pot shots, but Kluivert still gets more on target per 90 minutes. And I think I'd rather have the guy who has more on target than the guy who doesn't. And you can see also here, the shots in the box are great for Semenyo. He just clearly is taking them, and they are getting blocked. That is the only reason for that factor. In terms of actual creativity in the team, very, very similar. I don't think we can really split the two. Now, the big thing about both of these players before we come on to the fixtures is that Kluivert was always a good option. But because he was getting substituted around 60 minutes historically, Semenyo was the obvious pick. Now that they're a similar price, Kluivert's minutes, I'm going to assume, are going to remain pretty decent now because of the injury crisis Bournemouth do have. I think Kluivert is actually the one to go to over these both. As I mentioned, the expected goals per 90 for both is actually in Semenyo's favour when we take out penalties, but we can't just take out penalties and buy the guy who doesn't take him. I think what I'm seeing right now, Kluivert, if I was buying fresh, would be the one that I would buy. Now, is buying a Bournemouth attacker actually beneficial? That's what we need to ask ourselves now. Take a look at the fixtures. Forest at home in game week 23. Forest have been historically a good defence. Then we got Liverpool at home in game week 24. Again, Liverpool defensively, yes, they have leaked a couple of goals, but I wouldn't say that Liverpool are a great team to play against. Then we got the good fixtures in Southampton, Wolves. I'd even argue Brighton and Spurs defensively offer chances. So even though I think Kluivert is a great pick, I don't massively understand the huge influx in transfers when you've got arguably two of the best defences coming up next in Forest and Liverpool. Wouldn't be surprised if Bournemouth were to score a couple of goals in these, but is it enough to justify really going in on these picks? I think the answer is going to be no. So for me, I wouldn't be buying a Bournemouth player right now. I'll be monitoring Kluivert over the next two with a look to invest in them in game week 25. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So on the subject of attacking players, I thought I'd bring up two that don't score goals until game week 22, and that is going to be the Everton forwards Ndiaye at 5.4 million and Calvert-Lewin at 5.4 million. Calvert-Lewin has been a bit of a laughing stock this season, it is worth noting, but I for one am praying that under David Moyes we do see a little bit of an uptick in his goal scorer, because the numbers here are not fantastic. So the reason why some managers are looking to buy Everton forwards is because of the upcoming double in game week 24. Now I cannot sit here right now and say that I would be buying either of these two, especially without a double in 24. But we have to play what we got. And the fact they have a double in 24 automatically makes them transfer targets, especially when one of those games is Leicester at home. I think Leicester at home in itself is a great fixture. When you also jump on that Liverpool at home. Now, do I think Everton beat Liverpool? No. But with David Moyes in charge, could they potentially get the crowd going, nick a goal? There is the potential for that. And all you need is 180 minutes of Calvert-Lewin in a double in 24. And I think managers are going to be very tempted to go there, or Ndiaye. So the thing that we have to do right now is understand who is the one to buy if you do want to go there. And I think if you are a manager right now who's accumulated a lot of transfers, maybe 4 or 5, you could easily do like a Raul Jimenez to one of these two. You could do a João Pedro to one of these two, and then look to move them on later down the line. So both priced at the exact same price point. 0.21 goals per 90 for Ndiaye, 0.17 for Calvert-Lewin. And again, as I mentioned, Calvert-Lewin's conversion rate has just been atrocious this season, and he really hasn't passed the eye test. In terms of expected goals, though, Calvert-Lewin has put up really good numbers, 0.39 per 90, and that's in an Everton team in Sean Dyche who just weren't really doing much going forward. And Ndiaye at 0.19 per 90 minutes. In terms of shots, brilliant for Calvert-Lewin at 2.63. However, the ones on target, not so good, less than 1 per 90 minutes. Problem with Ndiaye here is, even though he scored in game week 22, the way that he scored that goal is exactly how I could probably foresee him scoring other goals. I almost look at him as a bit of a Cunha type of player. He's going to score worldies at times. He's usually the best player on the pitch, or technically, when we watch a player based on our eye test, he looks like the best on the pitch. And that goal we scored against Spurs was just only a baller could score that goal, similar to Calvert-Lewin's, I guess. But I think Ndiaye's numbers are a little bit concerning in the sense that I don't think he's an out-and-out goal scorer. I think he is a great player, and I do think he will score fantastic goals for Everton. But if I want to buy a forward in this Everton team, I want to get the one that at least puts up the numbers in that side. And I think that is going to continuously be Calvert-Lewin. We see David Moyes come out in press conferences and say that he wants to try and improve the attacking impetus of this Everton team. And that could come at the detriment of their defensive record. And that's an added bonus for those that are maybe looking to buy Everton forward. So coming into game week 23, I think you'd have to be in a very, very weird position in your team to even consider buying one of these two. But what I would do and suggest is monitor game week 23, see which one of these two, if any, show any sort of FPL value. And then if it is Calvert-Lewin, because I think the numbers are there, actually consider buying him in game week 24. I don't think you need to do it in game week 23. Watch, wait and see, and then look to buy them in game week 24. But if I had to nail my hat on one of these, it would be Calvert-Lewin. I just think his minutes will be good. And even though he is a woeful finisher, he does get the chances in this Everton team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So finally, I really want to talk about these three players here. Crystal Palace pair Eze and Mateta, and Aston Villa's Watkins. Now, I think naturally with a double game week coming up, the Ipswich at home game for Liverpool, we are all being very, very drawn towards those sorts of teams. But I think we need to also consider the teams that simply just have single game weeks. And that is going to include Crystal Palace and Aston Villa. And I really do feel like there are some brilliant opportunities for either of these three players, depending on what team structure you want to go for. Now, the big caveat that I want to say right now is that game week 29 has to be something in the back of your mind if you are to bring in both Crystal Palace and Aston Villa assets. The reason being is because of the EFL Cup final. Now, as you can see at the end there, Aston Villa play Liverpool in game week 29. If we are the assumption that Liverpool is going to overturn the deficit against Spurs and get to the final, which I think we all are really deep down, then that game will be a blank for Aston Villa. And the same applies for Crystal Palace. Newcastle with a 2-0 lead against Arsenal. Yes, Arsenal could overturn it, but also if Newcastle make the final, which they are the bookies' odds to do so, then they also become a blank. So if you are investing in this sort of structure, you need to remember you only have these players for game week 23 to 28, and then they could blank. But it's worth noting you, of course, can free hit. And the reason I want to mention that is because I've seen a lot of managers say, well, I can't buy Crystal Palace or Aston Villa in case that happens. But there are opportunities in the here and now to target. And you could blink, these good fixtures disappear, and then you're thinking to yourself, why did I pass up on that opportunity? So first, I want to touch on Ollie Watkins. 8.9 million. Yes, there is slight risk with John Duran, 100%. And the problem is that because Aston Villa lost in their Champions League game, it means that there's a bit more emphasis on their game against Celtic in their final one to get automatic qualification. So I will say this. I think Watkins is good for the West Ham game, but with them then plays Celtic, there is a little bit of a question mark about whether he would start also Wolves and then Ipswich. So you always have that caveat that you need to consider. However, do I think he starts 2 and gets minutes in the third? Yes, I do. And with the numbers that he's putting up right now, they are fantastic. And I think it's the first time in a while I'm looking at Watkins and thinking he is now fully fit. We really saw that in that Arsenal game. And I think it's a brilliant opportunity. If you're not convinced about someone like a Gakpo in your forward line, but you're looking to sell Nicholas Jackson or you're looking to sell Solanke, I think Ollie Watkins is absolutely a consideration for your team, especially over the next 3. And I'd even say game week 26 against Chelsea. I'm a Chelsea fan and I know that he will cause plenty of problems to that Chelsea back line. So I really do like Watkins. The big question is Mateta actually better at 5 or 6 million cheaper? So when we look at the numbers right now for him, XG per 90 at 0.52, fantastic. Big chances at 0.91. It's worth noting, Watkins historically has been a monster for big chances. Only Erling Haaland really gets close to him in that department. But Mateta really has found his form this season. Previously, going to the Olympics during the summer really hurt him at the start. Now fully fit, this Crystal Palace team are really clicking. I think Mateta is a brilliant buy. Looking at the fixtures coming up, Brentford at home always give up big chances. United away, don't think that's bad at all. Everton at home, also great. Even Fulham away, it's not ideal, but then Villa at home, Ipswich away. I think that block of fixtures there is really good for just Mateta, hold, and then reassess for that blank game week 29. Right now, if I had to buy one, I think because he's 1.6 million cheaper on penalties and just guaranteed game time, I think it would be Mateta just, but I do think Watkins could go unbelievably well over these next 3. And finally, Eze, finally getting that little bit of consistency in his returns that we all knew would eventually come. The underlying numbers have been good, 0.33 XG per 90, 0.23 expected assists. The problem, aren't getting many big chances and not doing great things on the bonus points. But as I mentioned, for a long-term pick, if you're in a situation right now where you're looking to maybe free up some funds to get to someone like a Gakpo up front, you could do Bruno down to Eze and then upgrade a forward to someone like a Gakpo. I do like that combination. And for the next 5-6 game weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if Eze was one of the highest performing midfielders at this price point. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section, but please do not overlook these three just because there's a potential blank in game week 29. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 23 Best Players to Buy video. I really hope it's provided some value. And of course, if I've missed any, please do let me know in the comments section. As always, if you enjoyed it, please do drop a like and smash that subscribe button. I'll be dropping a Game Week 23 preview video tomorrow and my team selection video on Friday, so you don't want to miss that. Take care, have a good day. Cheers.